Welcome to Women Winning Their Way. I'm your host, Clara Capano. Have you ever thought that your life was over? That you received some news and you thought there is absolutely no way to come back from this setback? Well, sometimes it's in those moments of setbacks where the set up really comes forward. It's in those moments where we are defined, where we dig in and find that courage that we thought maybe we didn't know we had. Well, that's what we're talking about today. And I am excited to bring to the stage Andrea Moulding, who is going to talk with us about her courageous journey and how she learned that nobody was going to hold her back. And even in the face of challenge, she was going to claim her own victory and create a movement and a path for other women to do the same. So, Andrea, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to speaking to you.
Yes, we were introduced by your sister.
That's
And once I started hearing about your story, I knew that I had to get you on because you have just done something incredibly remarkable as far as changing the way that people look at cancer, especially breast cancer. So we're going to be diving into that. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about you and who you are.
well, my name's Andrea, as you as you said. I've got my own marketing agency. I specialise in helping people differentiate themselves because we're all in a sea of sameness.
Mhm.
I'm also an author of 2 books, and I've got my own podcast, which I'm sure we'll be talking about a little bit later.
Definitely. I love what you're doing to change the world and create impact. So, Andrea, let's go back a little bit. What we're talking about here is helping women know that they can create success on their terms. But let's go back to when you were a little girl. When you were young and someone said, "Oh, let's create a successful life." What did you think success would look like for you when you were young?
I actually listened to another podcast about this, and I think someone said that they defined it was your podcast actually defined their success by money.
Mhm.
And I was always taught that if you work hard and you get your qualifications and you're good at your job, people will notice and you will succeed. But it life isn't like that at all, is it? You've got to, it doesn't matter how good you are if people don't know it, and quite often they don't know what good looks like.
Mhm.
And I think when I was a little girl, before they kind of knock all the creativity and enthusiasm out of you through school, I always wanted to write. I genuinely did. I found the most hideously embarrassing book of poems that I wrote when I was, teenage angst.
Mhm.
One day maybe I'll be brave enough to share them, but not quite now. And I always, wanted to be the lead singer of a band or all of those things. But I had a childhood illness as well, which just add to all of them. I had scoliosis when I was younger.
Mm.
I think it knocked a lot of confidence out of me.
Mhm.
And then I just didn't want to be different to anybody else. For many years, a couple of years, I had to wear a big plaster cast.
Mm.
And, you'd walk in the corridor and people would say, "Oh, there's the girl that's broken her neck," which I hadn't broken my neck. But, when you're a teenager, you just want to be the same as everyone else. So
Right.
I kind of just started working hard. And then I, went to London, got a job in sales, which I hated. But, it wasn't until later in life that I really pursued the sort of things that I wanted to do and found out what my strengths were and if you like, became brave. Because I think for many, many years I wasn't brave.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I really something that you said really stuck out for me is when you were a teenager and going through the scoliosis, all you wanted to do was fit in, and I think that that is so true for many of us, especially during our teenage years. And now as we get more mature, it's all about standing out. And I
Yeah.
think that there is so much again of how we define ourselves by trying to fit in at a younger age. So, talk to me though about this being brave, because I think you're absolutely right. I think more of us need to connect with that. So, what did that mean for you, and what were some of the things that you did, to help you be more brave?
Well, I don't know if my parents were very pleased, but I had a relatively good job in London, sales job, and I absolutely hated every minute of it. I was relatively good at it, but it didn't feed my soul. Do you know what I mean? And then I just didn't know what to do. So, like any kind of sensible person, I bought a ticket to go around the world and went traveling. And I
Nice.
went to China with my best friend, and we traveled very, very unsuccessfully in China. We lost our passports on the first day. They went running down a river. And
That's like a
then,
movie. I
yeah,
can see that happening.
it wasn't the China it is today,
Mhm.
but it was, everyone was in the green and the blue of the kind of communist era. There weren't many cars, everyone was on bikes. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire. And it wasn't really me having clarity and vision about what I wanted to
Mhm.
do. It was almost just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So
Right.
I'm just going to go do something exciting and then it'll all fall into place. But it didn't.
Definitely.
But when I came back, I realized I didn't want to be in sales anymore. So I trained as a social worker. I worked in the children and families team in the south of England, and then I was a probation officer for many years, and I absolutely loved it. Loved the job. I was a cognitive behavioural group worker,
Mhm.
so I used to run groups for well, ranging from quite hardcore offenders who were, quite
Mhm.
dangerous, through to just kind of jack the lads. I don't know if you say that in America, but just it was called enhanced thinking skills.
Mhm.
And it was all about people who don't think about consequences. So it was all the kind of 18, 19-year-old chaotic nightmare.
Right.
I loved it. I love
Well,
that
and
job.
talk about being brave. I mean, that definitely takes some bravery going
Well,
into a career like that.
well, it was funny. I realized that I kind of like talking to people. I that's what I like doing. And I don't
Mhm.
know if that's a skill that, obviously sales is something I did, but
Mhm.
I enjoyed making a difference and all that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
did.
they're having those connections, I think, and again, knowing that you're a part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and, a couple of pieces of work I was quite proud of. I remember there was a woman that, if you saw her in the street, you'd cross the road. She was about 6'4", absolutely covered in tattoos before they were trendy, obviously everyone's
Mhm.
got them now, and very, very aggressive. And, I was supervising her when I was a probation officer. I didn't just do group work, I supervised people in the community. And I remember once she was kind of really kicking off in this room I was in, and I was looking out the window and I said, "Well, you're just going to have to go if you're going to keep shouting at me." And she said, "Well, my car's in the car park, so I will." And I said, "What do you mean your car's in the car park?" And the probation office had about 4 spaces outside, and you could only park there if you were a manager. And I was just a lowly probation officer.
Mm.
She said, "Oh yeah, I parked there." I said, "What do you mean you park there?" I said, "I'm a probation officer. I'm not allowed to park there." We started laughing. Turned out that her car was just, she loved driving, she loved doing all of that. And so we got talking, and we got her funding to do forklift truck driving training. And when I was supervising her the next time, the bloke rang up who was doing the training and said to her, "You were amazing." And you could just see her like
Mhm.
gaining all that esteem. And she went on and got a job on the docks,
Yeah.
and never saw her again in terms of offending behaviour. I mean, I left, but she may have re-offended. But that was
Yeah.
the sort of work I enjoyed doing. But the trouble with probation services, it doesn't have enough money. So,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know,
that is a challenge.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
so
I want
it,
to dive into though your journey with cancer,
yeah,
because this is something where when we talk about creating success on your terms and we talk about forging through, you faced having breast cancer. And rather than curling up in a ball and just quote unquote accepting it, you actually had a new and a different approach to it that really has, again, led to a book, if not more, and also your podcast. So tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah, of course. So 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Had stage three, H2 positive, whatever it's called. And you hear that terrible word cancer, and I was the same as everyone else. Don't say I was brave initially. I wasn't. Obviously I was as shocked and terrified as everyone else. But I was very fortunate in that one of my best friends was a Macmillan nurse. I don't know if you have them in America, but she said to me, she didn't live nearby, but she said to me, "You're in the NHS. You're in the most amazing system. Just stay on the bus, do exactly what they tell you, and you'll get where you need to be." But when I was going through treatment, I couldn't handle any of the medical information at all. It was all words like tumor, and mass, and words that are absolutely terrifying.
Mhm.
And so, on one hand, you have all the NHS, information, which says, doctor speak, which terrifies you. And I'm like, no, I can't look at it. Other people will Google it all and be all brave. I wasn't brave. I couldn't look at
Mhm.
it. And then they give you all the Macmillan pamphlets, which are all kind of aimed at everyone. They're very generic. They're very boring. They're very dull. But, they don't offend anyone and they tell you the information and what have you. And what I felt was later when I'd got through it, and I had a mastectomy. I've just had reconstruction surgery 4 years later. So we love the NHS, but it's not you do have to wait sometimes. And what I did was I wrote a book called Stay on the Bus. And what it is, it's a kind of humorous look at breast cancer. So it tells you everything you need to know. And I used the phrase stay on the bus because it became my mantra. So
Mhm.
I wrote this book, Stay on the Bus, and it took me ages. I used to go to McDonald's at kind of 6 o'clock in the morning and, when there was no one there and
Right.
hammer away. And then through that, through doing the book, I my editor, who's called Estelle, um, she her and I were chatting on the phone. And when you meet someone and you just think, I was meant to meet you. It was ordained or
Mhm.
whatever it is. She was hilarious. So we started chatting about all the hilarious things that happen to you when you have cancer treatment. And we said, we should do a podcast on this. So we let it go. And then she said, well, I don't want it to do any of this kind of, poor you, you've got cancer. So we decided to do a funny podcast called it's called Get It Off Your Chest, The Funny Side of Breast Cancer. And it's about all the ridiculous stories and things that happen. We have a guest every week. And the idea behind it is it has several reasons we do it. First of all, it's to get the conversation going about cancer, because when you have cancer, it's incredibly isolating.
Mm.
People don't know how to talk to you. You don't know how to talk about it. Um, it's not a normal thing. The word cancer is terrifying. So if you can laugh about it, then it normalizes it. And it also is creating a community. We have a community of women now that, send us stuff on Instagram and laugh about what's happening to them.
Mhm.
All sorts of terrible things happen to you when you're having breast cancer. But if you can laugh at it, then other people you don't go through it all angst. You can
Right.
just laugh and say, well, that happened to Andrew, that happened to Estelle, that happened to that guest. It just normalizes it, and it gets the conversation going, and that's why we
Yeah.
did it.
And I love that so much because it's not about ignoring it. It's not about, say minimizing it, but it is about changing the way and changing the perspective around it. Because if you are walking around, regardless of if it's cancer, another illness, a divorce, loss of a child, all of those things can weigh so heavy on us. And sometimes, and I love how you kind of frame it as normalizing it opens up the doors to start conversation. And why is it so important for us to be talking about this? Why do we need this conversation around cancer?
When I say when you have breast cancer, people start treating you differently.
Mhm.
And you just want to be you're still the same person, even though you go bald, lose
Mhm.
your eyelashes, you might have drains hanging out of you and lose your breast or whatever, all of those things happen to me. And you look different, you know that people, treat you differently and you don't want to be treated differently. You're the same person. And you've just got to make it easy for people to have those conversations with you. So if somebody, your listeners, find out someone's got breast cancer, don't just say, "What can I do?"
Mhm.
Because that puts the onus on that person to tell you what they want to do, and they might feel embarrassed. Say, "I can do the shopping, I can take the kids, I can take you to chemo," all of those things. It just opens a conversation, and people aren't frightened of the word. And like I say, it's a community,
Mhm.
and also laughter. I mean, I only realized this afterwards, but laughter is actually being proven to help people. It releases endorphins. It really is the best medicine. I know it's a cliche, but it's absolutely true.
It is. It is. So, can you share maybe one or two of the funny things that happened to you and that funny side of breast cancer?
Well, I put a lot of them in the book. I mean, one of them, I talk about going bald, and how a lot of people really struggle with it, and I wasn't alone, that I really struggled with it as well. And you get a kind of wig that they give you through the NHS, and I'm not knocking the NHS because I think they're great, but they give you this kind of wig, and it's itchy, it's hot. I never bothered with mine except for parents' evening, when the kids want you to look normal. Um, so I used to wear this big kind of chemo hat and massive shades, and I'd go down to Tesco's and what have you. Anyway, this one day, this guy sneezed all down my leg. When you're having chemo, you're totally paranoid about
Yeah.
germs, everything. You're like neurotic about kind of germs and everything. And you're having chemo, and the kids were with me, and I shouted at this, like, totally out of character, just shouted at this guy, and chased him down the aisle, telling him how disgusting he was, and the tissue aisles down there, and well, the kids just they died. They hid from me. They kind of
Mm.
melted into the kind of cornflake aisle. And I just said, when I got home, I just said to the kids, "Well, next time I'm in Tesco's, I'll have hair, and I won't be wearing sunglasses.
Mhm.
No one will recognize me, so it's absolutely fine. You can go out there."
Absolutely. What a great spin on it.
But
Yeah.
there was a woman that was fantastic, who was on our podcast. She was bald. She was a CEO of a company. And she said, when she was in meetings, she didn't want people to talk about her bald head because of cancer. So she had eyes tattooed on the back of her head. She said, if anyone's going to talk about my bald head, they're going to talk about these tattooed eyes.
There you
She was
go.
extreme. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Again, it's just such a refreshing way to, take it in and to again shift it because, I would imagine, there's a lot of people would come to you maybe with that feeling of, guilt or shame or pity. And again, you don't need to feel like a victim. It's,
yeah.
let's work on this and let's go forward. As you started to speak out and share this funny side, did anybody try to shut you down and try to pull you back in and make you feel bad for doing this?
Do you know, it's really funny you asked that, because Estelle was talking about it the other day. There are some people that don't get it off your chest, the funny side of breast cancer. They kind of tell you off and say that, cancer's, not something that you should be laughing about. Cancer
Mhm.
is very serious and you're minimizing it. Well, they don't get it. And if you don't get it, that's fine. You're not my target audience. You're
Mhm.
not who I'm trying to reach. You know, I'm sure there's lots of podcasts that talk about the more kind of distressing sides
Mhm.
and the mental health issues, and that's all very valid and absolutely no criticism at all. But our podcast isn't a pity party. It is there to make people laugh out loud. And we've had some fantastic feedback. I mean, we've had some people who think it's, you know, really inappropriate. But as you get older, and it's made
Mhm.
me much braver, you know, I think maybe 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast to be honest,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't be on a podcast talking about breast cancer, talking about breasts, talking
Mhm.
about nipples, you know, all those things that you just don't talk about. And I have a professional persona as well. And it's quite hard to marry the two sometimes. And then I just thought, I said to someone the other day, you know, I'm on LinkedIn and I post about the podcast as well. I get a lot of guests through LinkedIn. And I thought, well, you know what? That's me. That is me.
Mhm.
And you either get me or you don't get me. And I
Right.
think that's that's the gift of cancer. It makes you know who you are. It makes you not be ashamed. If you know, you've got to embrace it. A lot of the guests that we've had on have said they've actually pleased that they've had cancer because they found their direction in life. Like we've had a
Mhm.
stand-up comedian who advocates for going flat after mastectomy. She's the Indianapolis mullet champion. She's hilarious. She's a stand-up comedian
Mhm.
because of her cancer. We've
Right.
got another woman that is a model, you know, and she does it flatties, they're called the flatties, and she models because of her cancer. And Estelle and I met because of our cancer. And I'd actually wrote a book when I was going through chemotherapy, a novel. I'd always wanted to, and when I had all that time on my hand, when you're kind of languishing in hospital beds and corridors and lying in bed,
Mhm.
I wrote a book called Throwing Salt at the Devil. That was a novel. I've always wanted to do it. I've never been brave enough. But cancer gave me the time and thought, well, if I'm not going to do it now, you know, use this time
Yeah.
and don't get chemo brain, which is when they, you know, your brain. It's like being pregnant without the fun. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, I really appreciate what you say because again, I know that we're talking about, the illness of cancer, especially breast cancer, but I think in so many ways when we are challenged, oftentimes again that gives us the courage and the bravery because we're like, what do I have to lose? And I wish on some level we could feel that way normally, but I think again we're just not programmed. I think we're programmed to play it safe, to again to fit in, to do all of those. But when you're faced with the who cares, what do I have to lose, you start leaning into who you truly are. And like you said, you probably wouldn't have done these things because one, you wouldn't have had the awareness that it was needed. But now it might be time for you to go and start that band because, let's have some bravery and work on that. But, again, you took something that was very painful, that was very personal, and you shed light on it. And you opened up the door to conversation. And I think that's another beautiful, moment that I want people to really, hone into is because you mentioned that it can be very isolating. And I think we have to remember that, yes, we need to grieve on our own. And yes, we need to face these things, but there is also power in community. There is power in talking about it, in bringing light to it, in asking for help, and doing this because I do believe we grow stronger and there isn't shame in vulnerability. And sometimes I think that there is again more strength in us opening up. Have you been able to experience that not just for you but for some of the other people that you've had on the guest and that follow your show?
Well, I think a lot of people who want to come on the show, they'll kind of skirt around the edges sometimes, and they'll kind of have little conversations, well, quite big conversations with me through Instagram direct message, and we'll chat back to each other. And oh, I don't know if my story's funny, and
Mhm.
what have you. And Estelle, my my podcast host, is a natural comedian. She's a Scouser where the Beatles come from. So we try and put people at their ease. And I think once they come on the show and realize that we're women and we're behind them and we want them to succeed and we want them to tell their story, they kind of forget that it goes out on podcasts. And we always say to them, if you're not happy with any of it, we can cut it out.
Mm,
If you change your mind and decide that that story was a little bit close to the bone, we're not going to embarrass anyone. But it has brought people out, and we've had. I want to do a conference, an online conference for cancer survivors with
mhm,
information, because not everyone is in London or near Maggie centres or whatever. You know, Myself, I was kind of out in the sticks a bit, and that's my next big thing, is to put on an online conference with all lots of speakers. I have comedians. I've already got the
fantastic.
software. Someone's given it to me, and they're going to help me with it, and that's my next big plan, really. And I think for me, what it's taught me is that if you have an idea, it doesn't have to sit at the back of your head. You can let it come to the front, you can play with it and talk to people about it, and then it becomes real. And you don't
Mhm,
have to do it, but it's nice to be able to dream and think, that would be brilliant if we did that. That would be hilarious. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. And the
mhm.
more energy you put out there, people fall into place for you. Do you know what I mean? And
It's
I
so true. And that's
Yeah,
another reason why it's so important to share, because you never know who's listening. One, that you can help, but also who's listening that can help you. And, I think that that is such a wonderful idea for you to put that conference together. And I think it would be so powerful. And when you get ready to do that, please let me know, because I definitely want to help promote that and connect you with others that can be on
that
it,
would be
because I
amazing.
think
Thank
that would
you.
be pretty fantastic. So I want to go back to this concept of staying on the bus. And I know that, one of your friends said, just stay on the bus, as far as just do what you need to do and follow the process. So you did that, but it also seems like you kind of got off the bus a little bit by, bringing in a little bit of the humor. So, what does staying on the bus mean to you now?
Well, I think staying on the bus is about a kind of safety net, if you like, for me.
Mhm,
It was almost like a kind of mantra and a belief that the NHS, it has its faults because of funding, but it's the most amazing organisation in the world. And, I see people in America who are weighing up whether they can afford to have chemotherapy. Maybe they haven't got insurance. I don't know all the ins and outs
mhm,
or whatever. But the NHS is a gold standard system, and it's about trusting in that. But I also think Stay on the Bus has taught me to advocate, if that's the right word. Can't say it, but I know what I mean, for myself. So
mhm.
rather than kind of going into my medical, appointments like you go in and see your school teacher, you turn into a 14-year-old. I now will advocate for myself, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Well, no, I'm not happy with not obviously most
Yeah.
things I am happy with, but, staying on the bus is yes, trusting in the system, but it doesn't mean you haven't got a voice. It doesn't mean that everything's right in the system. Like, I think in the UK, we're not offered going flat after mastectomy as an option. I didn't even know it existed until I started the podcast. Whereas in America, it is a it's seen as an option for women,
Mhm.
and there's a whole movement out there. They're amazing and who advocate for it. I also think that a lot of the NHS is very perfunctory. You're treated like a broken table.
Mm.
I'm not criticizing the NHS because they're amazing, but I think there's a place for um, more kind of holistic stuff.
Mhm.
There's a place for, humor as well,
Right, right.
but they don't have the funding to do all of that.
Mhm,
They get you better, but no, I think it's Stay on the Bus has been a very important part of my
mhm.
life, um, in that it's shown me what I'm capable of. You see, I never thought I would be an author, or a writer, or whatever the word is
Mhm.
that you want to say. I wrote the novel when I was going through chemo. I'd had it in my head for years, and I just thought now's the opportunity. But Stay on the Bus was it was an absolute kind of joy and nightmare to write because everybody's breast cancer is different. Not
Sure.
everybody wants to approach it. I think
Hmm.
we're all different colours. I'm a yellow if you use the IMA system, where I'm kind of talk to everyone and I don't want to know much detail. Whereas some people want all the information. So
Hmm.
when I designed the book, I had to design it for whatever sort of person. I split it into three bits:
Yeah.
diagnosis, which was about all this kind of shock that you feel and you're not alone, and
Hmm.
these are the questions you need to ask. Treatment, which is obviously the biggest bit, but not everyone has a mastectomy, not everyone has a lumpectomy, not everyone has chemo. It was quite difficult to logistically do it. And then the bit that I think is missing in cancer treatment, which is when when you have breast cancer, you're at the hospital like 5 times a week, radiotherapy every day for kind of 2 weeks. You're constantly there. And then all of a sudden, the oncologist says to you, "Okay, well, we'll see you in a year." And it's just like, I call that bit cutting the apron strings.
Sure.
It's that terrifying moment when you're so institutionalized into seeing, the safety net of the professionals. All of a sudden, you're on your own. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's when all the mental health stuff starts.
Wow.
And,
Yeah. What a
you know,
great perspective. I never thought about that. And it's so true. That again, once they sort of quote unquote fix you, they're like, here you go.
yeah,
And
see you
it's
in a
that
year. Yeah.
re-entry back into life. That is just, what a great way. And I just, again, really appreciate you, talking about this idea that, even though you're following the process, you need to still advocate for yourself. And I think, that is something because it can be very easy to just fall in line. But again, you have to listen to yourself. You have to listen to your body. You have to know what's right for you. Ask more questions if you don't understand. And I think that, that's a really big part of, everything in life is being able to stand up and do that.
Mm.
So we've talked about your podcast. We've talked about your vision for building an online conference, which I know is going to happen for you. What else are you working
Well, I'm Estelle and myself are obviously, we really want the podcast to become global.
on? Hmm.
We, for some reason, we seem to be bigger in America than when we are in the UK, and I don't know why. I think it's the old British Reserve.
Mm.
Um, but because breast cancer affects 1 in 8, we are going all out to reach as many women as we can and give them the message that it's okay to laugh at cancer, because if something deserves to be laughed at, it's cancer, and join the community, be, reach out, don't be isolated. And if you've got a problem, talk to people and try and laugh about it. So that's something that's clearly always, we're
Mhm.
really trying to push it at the moment. And my other plan, which I've put out to the universe, is I've written Salt, Throwing Salt at the Devil. I'm going to write a sequel, which I've already started planning. And then I've decided it's going to be made into a TV show, a 6-part
Fabulous.
TV show. And you know what? Like I said, dare to dream. Because
I love it.
if you don't, then you'll always say, "Oh,
Mhm.
I had a dream." Well, you know what? You never know what's around the corner, and you can try and fail. And on the way, you'll probably meet loads of really good people. You might go in a different direction.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Again, it's leaning into that bravery that you talked about. So, Andrea, it's been so great having you on the show. I have one more question that I want to ask you, but before I do that, I just want to just really acknowledge you. This going through this, I would imagine was very scary. And like you mentioned, isolating, and nobody's journey is the same. But I just honor and respect you so much for taking something very scary, very clinical, and trying to humanize it and really opening the doors to other women, other families, and men too, to understand that it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It doesn't have to be sadness and anger the entire way, and that there are, people out there like you that are opening the door and trying to make it that much easier. And so I just want to say Thank you for doing that. And I'm really excited to see your dreams come together because I know they're going to continue to have amazing impact on a global level. So thank you for doing that.
Well, no, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to reach a wider audience, and thank you so much for those kind words. I really,
Yeah,
really appreciate it. Thank you so
you're welcome.
much.
So, our last question, we started off the conversation by what did you think success was going to be when you were a kid? Now, sitting here where you are today, going through everything that you've gone through, how do you define success for yourself now?
Gosh, that is a really good question. And I think it's not a monetary thing, but for me, I don't think it ever was.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I was a child, I had all these dreams, and I do think they are knocked out of you by school, and also being a woman. You're not expected to, you know, you've got your limit. Don't go any higher. For me, success is like, if I want to do something, I have the bravery and the courage and, you know, the will to make it happen, rather than just sitting on my hands and thinking, "Oh, that's an idea. I wish
Mhm.
actually the you know, feeling it in your heart and making it happen."
Yeah. I love that. Feel it in your heart and make it happen. Well, what a powerful conversation. So, Andrea, again, thank you. We're going to put all of your information, your contact information, how to connect with you, how to get on the podcast and follow the podcast. We'll put all of that in the show notes. And for all of you that are watching, throw some love Andrea's way. And again, give that love to everybody out there that is fighting not just cancer, but fighting those battles that can really be draining. If you found power in this, please make sure to like, subscribe, and definitely share this podcast because I guarantee you know someone out there that is struggling. And remember, laughter can be the best medicine. So thank you for watching Women Winning Their Way. I'm your host, Clara Capano, and we will see you next time. Wow. What a powerful conversation. Three words or concepts really stood out to me as Andrea was talking: the idea of bravery, the idea of advocating for yourself, and the idea of laughter. When we talk about forging forward, when we talk about creating success and doing it on our terms, we need those three things. We have to be brave. And you know what? It is scary. It's scary to get out there, to put yourself in the public, to share your dreams and to take those chances, especially if you don't know what that lifeline and what that safety net might be. But you know what? Greatness doesn't happen without bravery. So go after things, have this mindset. You know, what do you have to lose? Yes, you might get egg on your face. Yes, you might fall down. But you know what? You're still doing things. And you want to make sure that you're always taking those chances. Talking about advocating for yourself. No one is going to be a better cheerleader than you. So, whether you're going through an illness such as cancer, whether you're going through the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, or even trying to just find yourself, you need to speak up and advocate for yourself. If you need something, if you're lost, if you're confused, if you're afraid, I guarantee you're not the only one feeling this way. So don't feel that you just need to take what comes your way. Stand up and advocate for yourself. And then lastly, laugh. Life is hard. Each and every day, we are just bombarded with more and more stuff, and it can be very overwhelming. But in most cases, not all, but in most cases, they are what we call first world problems. And when we can take them in and look at it from a different perspective and choose to laugh at it, remember, we can't control what happens. All we can control is our responses to them. And when we can decide to find the humor, to find that lighter side, those negative things that are happening to us don't control us. We take the ownership, we take the control back rather than giving it to that negative side. So, no matter what it is that you are facing, no matter what it is that you are going through, Remember, this is a platform to remind all women that you can win on your terms, that you don't need to sit back and do what society is telling you to do. You don't need to play small. You can stand up for yourself. You can go out there and chase those dreams and always, always know that you can create success all on your terms. So, thanks for watching another episode of Women Winning Their Way. We'll see you next time. I'm Clara Capano, and have a great day working on creating success all on your terms.